My mom's dog, Punky, rest in peace, was a very sweet, loving dog. She was an ESA dog, but trained to be a service dog for PTSD before she lost her leg. I had never seen her get aggressive with anyone in the entire 12 years she lived. She never growled or nipped anyone, and she had no sense of smell, so she loved all animals and people, a real gentle giant among our little terriers at 60 pounds. What I'm getting at here was that her barking at something and being aggressive was so wildly uncharacteristic that I only saw it once. I, an 11-year-old female, was at home with my siblings. My brother is 2, and my sister is 6. My stepdad is then at work, and my mom ran up to the gas station to grab a pack of cigarettes. It was only a mile or 2 away from us. For reference, we lived in a 2-bedroom trailer in the middle of the woods on a dead-end road at the time, and you had to really make an effort to get down our road, find our house, navigate down our rickety driveway, and find the door. I'm sitting at the computer, having a grand time watching YouTube videos, when all of a sudden all of our dogs, about 2 Boston Terriers and 1 Chihuahua, perk up, bark a few times, and start investigating down the hall. My siblings were napping in the bedroom at the end of the hall at the time, so I figured they just stirred and scared the dogs. But then Punky sits up suddenly, stands up on the couch, and puffs her chest out. Her ears are perked up, her fur standing on end, her tail straight up, and then she barks, loudly. I mean, the bark booms through the living room and echoes around, and all of a sudden she lunges off of the couch and goes tearing down the hallway. I'm already on edge because I don't think I've ever heard her bark, ever. She's a Basenji mix, so her bark is more of a baying sound, but this was a big, loud, alert bark. I stand up and go to look down the hallway, ready to fight off what I'm assuming is a shadow monster in the hallway based on how the dogs are acting, but then I hear it. Knock, knock, knock. We didn't get visitors because of how weird our house was location-wise, so my 11-year-old mind had no clue what to do here. The only people who showed up here were family, and they didn't knock, so I slowly walked towards the door. The knock drew the attention of the dogs, and they came running back down the hallway, all except for Punky, and I felt better with our 3 yappy dogs in the room with me, even if they were all the size of New York City sewer rats. I opened the door just a bit, and standing on our porch is the sketchiest man I think I've ever seen. I can still picture him perfectly. He was a really thin, taller man with dark hair and a sunken face, bags under his eyes, and this half-managed hair, sort of like he just gave it a quick brush and then figured it was good enough. Everything about him seemed just a little too thin, a little too shallow, and his clothes were all off too. They were nice, but fake nice, you know? Like a clean, newer-looking t-shirt and new jeans, but he had what looked like a suit jacket on. All his clothes were dark too, despite the fact that it was summer in Texas and the weather was definitely into the 100s that day. He also had this plain, unlabeled bottle in his hand. It looked like the label had been covered up and taped over. I stare up at him in confusion because I definitely don't know this man, and I ask what he wants. He smiles at me in this way that's way too fake, like this exaggerated and forced grin, and he spoke in the same voice retail workers do. "Hey there, kiddo, I'm trying to sell this here carpet cleaner," and he shakes the bottle at me. "Mind if I come in to show you how good it works?" Alarms are going off in my head because he just seems so off. Looking back with an adult perspective, the fact that he didn't ask if my parents were home is unnerving, because he probably knew they weren't, and that's why he was there in the first place. I should have told him to get off our property, that I'd have to go get my mom, something except what I did say, but I didn't. Instead, I just shook my head and said, "No, we don't have carpet." "Well, it works on other things." And he took a big step towards the door and shook the bottle at me. I start to freak out, and think to close the door, but the thing is, our front door didn't even lock. Small town, hard to access home, we never needed a lock, so that's basically useless. I'm sure there's something very wrong about to happen, and I'm terrified as I think about what to do in the few seconds I think I have before it does happen, when all of a sudden I hear it. Punky had crept up from the hallway, lowered towards the ground with her teeth bared and snarling like she was feral. She had slobber just dripping from her mouth, her ears were down, and she was ready to pounce. The guy hears it too, and as I look towards Punky, she tries to lunge past me, and I just barely catch her with my leg as she tries her hardest to duck past me and attack this guy. He freaks out and runs off the porch without another word, booking it down the driveway as I let Punky out along with the rest of our dogs, and they start chasing him. Our small dogs chase him down the driveway and stop about halfway, barking and jumping about, but Punky stops just on the porch and watches him with her ears perked, just staring in the distance until he disappears. I swear I saw someone join up with him running when he got onto the road. The second he disappeared, Punky's entire body language changed, and she went back to being the sweet dog I knew. No barking or growling, just laying around, mouth and throat covered in slobber still. I realized my siblings are still down the hall and run to check on them, and when I get to the bedroom, my siblings were sleeping soundly still. But the bedroom window was wide open, the curtains pushed all to one side, and the items on the dresser in front of the window all shoved around. Someone had tried to climb through the window, no doubt in my mind about it. From what I can gather, the bedroom window was visible from the couch where Punky was sleeping, so I think someone was trying to climb through the window before Punky went after them and scared them off, and the man at the door was meant to distract me. They didn't expect Punky, a bigger dog, because most of the time she was with my mom inside, while our small dogs were the ones that saw public eye more often. I don't know what they intended to do, but after my mom got home, she took all of us to my aunt's house, and on our way there, we saw the men walking up someone else's driveway. Men, plural, because we watched a second one split off to wait by the road. So, to the two men apparently going door to door to sell their unlabeled carpet cleaner, I'd really rather not meet again.
Way back in 1991, I was in my second year of high school. I volunteered to assist students who had special needs back then. I read textbooks aloud and recorded the audio for students with visual impairments, acted as a sign language interpreter for a deaf classmate, and helped out with 2 classes for students with cognitive impairments. It was through this volunteer work that I met T. T had quite severe cerebral palsy, used a power wheelchair, and was visually impaired. I began as a textbook reader for her. It soon became quite obvious that she didn't really have any friends, as most of the kids who were not disabled really avoided those kids who were. There was a lot of bullying of the students with disabilities. Soon I began accompanying T to her classes in order to help her avoid jerks, especially when it became known that she kept some of the morphine pills she needed for severe chronic pain in the bag on the back of her wheelchair. Guys began trying to steal those pills, even resorting to violence. Because T was nearly blind, she could not identify the jerks who attacked her. If I was with her, they didn't try. I felt bad for her. She was very isolated, as her family lived a long way outside of town, and the local mobility bus would not go that far. All weekends and all holidays, she was stuck at home while the rest of us got to hang out with friends. So I started being a friend. I gave her my home number, so at least she'd have someone to talk to on the weekends. Over the next couple of years, that became kind of an unequal friendship. She was a taker. If I had plans with other friends, she would moan about how she had no one else, how depressed she was, how she just wanted to kill herself. It really was strange, just how she always seemed to know when I had plans with other friends. If I wanted to go out with them, she'd know and call me and guilt me into dropping them to stay on the phone with her. I mean, she always knew, and I could never figure out how. Being the naive, socially inept kid I was, I'm autistic and social stuff is especially difficult for me, I fell for this manipulation. I'd get guilted out and cancel my plans with my real friends so I could stay on the phone with her. I didn't even like talking on the phone. My other friends and my mother did try to warn me that the way she was acting, dominating my time and manipulating me, was unhealthy and not the way a real friend acted, but I felt like I had to defend her to them as she had nobody else. I found her exhausting, and I was having mental health struggles of my own. But I kept quiet and never spoke about my increasing anxiety, self-injury, depression, and suicidal impulses. I didn't want to be mistaken for being anything like T, who brought up her abuse. I really do think that she made all that stuff up, as the details changed with every telling. Depression and suicide attempts whenever she wasn't getting what she wanted. So I didn't tell anyone how desperate and depressed I felt. And I hid my self-injury. Looking back on it, I really did need help, but I kept it all a secret. Partway through my 4th year of high school and her 3rd, she moved into a local supported living home for people who had disabilities who needed help with things like dressing, bathing, meal prep, etc. Now that she was living right in my own town, there was no escape. I couldn't do anything with anyone without her finding out about it and guilting me over it. You don't care about me, just like everyone else. I just want to kill myself. No one wants me around, so I may as well just die. Things like that. Sheesh. Eventually, if she called the house phone, no mobile phones back then, thank fate, or I'd have had no freedom from her at all, my parents would always say I wasn't home, even if I was. They gave excuses like my being at my piano lessons, or my figure skating lessons, or at my job at a local diner. If T got my mother on the phone, she would try to do to Mum what she was doing to me. Thankfully, Mum was far better at setting boundaries than her daughter was, and would only talk with T for a few minutes before giving a polite excuse and hanging up. Finally, I graduated. I chose a university that was a good 3-hour drive away from home, in part to avoid T. She would not be able to get to my new city. My room was in a building that was not wheelchair accessible, and there would be long distance phone charges. With me away from home and inaccessible, T went after my mother's attention with an unnerving ferocity, calling multiple times every evening. That was the reason my parents finally got caller ID and voicemail, just so they could avoid answering the phone when T called. Years went by and I came back home after university. I began working for the local hospital. Facebook arrived on the scene and I joined up to keep in contact with friends and family who were now living all over the country. I hadn't thought of T in years. Then she sent a friend request and I felt exactly like I did when I was in high school. Hounded. Needless to say, I blocked her. Eventually, I canceled my Facebook account entirely, as she began making fake profiles to attempt to contact me. Thankfully, it has been about 10 years since she had last attempted to contact me, and I have made that difficult. Neither my mother or I are listed in the local phone book. I don't use my real name anywhere online, and I am very cautious about giving my mobile number to others. I don't know where she is, but I do hope she changed her ways and finally has friends she doesn't have to manipulate into hanging out with her.